back to the Packsack Project. We're happy to be joined today with Denise Atkinson. Denise is the owner of Tea Horse, an Indigenous-owned artisanal tea company, which is located in northwestern Ontario in Thunder Bay. Denise, welcome to the program. I'd like to give you a minute to introduce yourself.
Bonjour, Denise Nindigenakaz, Anishinaabe Kwenin, Maingin Ndodem. Hello, my name is Denise. I'm an Objibwe woman of the Wolf Clan. I am from the Red Rock First Nation in Northern Ontario, which is just outside of the town of Nipigon on top of Lake Superior. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. Denise, can you tell us a story behind the name Tea Horse and how it reflects the essence of your tea company and what it has to offer?
So Tea Horse, as you said, is an Indigenous woman-owned artisanal tea and wild rice company. We've created and we produce a first-of-its-kind wild rice tea using a proprietary roasting method that we've created. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It's quite an interesting process. So Tea Horse started about 6 or 7 years ago. My partner, Mark Bohemier, and I were both, avid tea drinkers, lifelong tea drinkers. And we decided that we would go to the Toronto Tea Festival. It was my birthday. We're going to go visit my sisters in Toronto. We thought, we'll make like a weekend of it. We'll go to this tea festival that was held at the resource library on Yonge Street. We thought we'll spend a couple hours there, check it out. It was a 2-day event. So we get there and we're like, wow, we thought we knew tea. It was like all these people, all these cultures from all over the world. They had sessions doing tea tastings, tea information, there was just so much. So instead of spending 2 hours there, we spent the whole 2 days there, just immersing ourselves in the tea culture and learning a lot about how Indigenous people all over the world are the caretakers of these ancient tea trees, like Yunnan, China. There was a fellow named Jeff Fuchs who did a presentation on his expedition through the Tea Horse Road, that brought salt and different commodities years and years ago, through the Himalayas. So Tea Horse was kind of paying homage to these amazing people who trekked the Himalayas, bringing tea and salt and, tar, I think it was pine resin, through the Himalayas. So again, Tea Horse is part of the Indigenous peoples of the world, but also part of the Objibwe horse, which is a critically endangered horse that was here pre-contact, was in Canada pre-contact in Northern Ontario, specifically the Lac La Croix area of Northwestern Ontario. So these amazing creatures, these resilient creatures, these amazing, resilient Indigenous people, that's where the word Tea Horse came along, and it just has a nice ring to it. It gets people talking. That's where it all started.
So Indigenous culture and tradition play a significant role in the tea company. How does your background shape the vision and mission of Tea Horse?
So after attending this tea festival, coming back to Thunder Bay, there were very few tea shops or anything like that. There's a lot of coffee shops. This is like a coffee town. There's, the national retailers. I won't name any. So we thought, why don't we start at like a tea room tea company in Thunder Bay and bring this premium, amazing tea to the people of Thunder Bay. Again, I'm an Ojibwe woman. Tea is really part of me, part of my family. In many Indigenous cultures, leaves, roots, flowers, grains, that's what we call tea. It's not always just the Camellia sinensis plant. We refer to many things that we infuse as tea. So we started this tea room. We wanted this feeling of community, of family. Like my fondest memories are me sitting around my grandmother's table with my aunties and, my cousins, my mom, sisters, and just chatting and laughing and sharing. And it was always a pot of tea, always a pot of tea. My earliest memory is staying with my grandparents who helped raise me. And my grandpa would bring my grandmother a cup of sweet black tea early in the morning. He always got up at like 5 a.m. And I would get to, steal a little bit of a little sip of tea. And that, it reminds me of home, of family, of love. So tea is just so huge in my life and Indigenous people's lives in community. So we started this tea room. We started dabbling a bit of e-commerce, like online, because we get a lot of people, tourists, for instance, they would come in, buy some tea, and they would want to buy more. So we started an online shop. And I must say that all of our suppliers are these amazing tea specialists in Canada. So we source directly from them, who they are the ones who travel to the tea regions of the world and, source this amazing product. And we're lucky enough to have an excellent connection with these people that we met at the Toronto Tea Festival, who are our suppliers. So we started this tea room, started dabbling a little bit of e-commerce. COVID hit. So thankfully we had already started with e-commerce. So it was actually an easy transition for us we closed our shop and just started really pursuing the online shop, started really pursuing wholesale. During COVID, you'll remember there were a lot of conferences online and different events online. So we would get a lot of wholesale orders from Ottawa, Toronto, all the bigger cities, Vancouver, of people putting on conferences and would want to have something in the swag bags, have tea or, whatever product. So that really bumped up our online presence, our wholesale. So, after COVID, we just thought, what, this is the way to go. E-commerce is the future. So that's mainly now we sell online. I don't know if you want me to tell you now that I've done a lot of trade missions to the US. So we're not only selling in Canada, across Canada, we're starting to sell to tribal owned casinos and resorts in the US who are really great customers of ours and are really, they're interested in what we term an Indigenous style tea. Although it's based on genmai cha, which is a Japanese style green tea blended with popped white or brown rice, we've taken it and made it our own using, one of the only grains indigenous to the Americas, wild rice, and blending it with green tea. Now we're blending it with a black tea, like a masala chai with spices. And we also do one that is just the roasted manoomin. It's like an infused grain. And in a lot of cultures, like in Taiwan, South Korea, they drink like a roasted barley tea. So we kind of have our Indigenous Canadian style of tea with the roasted manoomin, paying homage to the roasted grain teas of the world.
Mm-hmm. So, Denise, for someone who doesn't know the process of harvesting wild rice, are you able to just take us through the traditional methods of harvesting it and its significance?
So when we went on a manoomin harvest, so I should clarify that manoomin is the Anishinaabe word for wild rice. So it's important to me to keep the language alive. So I really like to use the Objibwe word when I'm speaking of wild rice. So manoomin cha is our wild rice tea, cha being tea in like a lot of the Asian languages, and then chai in South Asian. So our manoomin chai is like the masala chai, and then the manoomin cha is like wild rice tea. So we went on a wild rice manoomin harvest in northern Manitoba a few years ago. and it was amazing. Like, as far as the people that we purchase from, we do purchase from many Indigenous harvesters who bring the harvest to a processing plant. So we went with the harvesters, drive for kilometers, park your vehicle, get on quads, drive way into the forest, into this peat bog, like this floating peat bog. They don't use canoes. The people we purchase from, they use airboats, but there's still canoes involved because they bring it to the shore, and then it gets into a canoe. So it's amazing to be in this environment of, teeming with flies and birds and bugs, and like it's just so quiet, but yet you hear nature. Like, it was just amazing. They go out on the boat, they drive, it's almost like the Everglades, I guess, going through the rice paddy, and they bring it back. It's in a hopper, then they transfer it to bags, and they transfer it to an Argo, which travels across the peat bog. Then they bring it to their quads, then they bring it to their vehicle, then they bring it to the processing plant. So it is such a process. And if people think, wild rice is so expensive, well, the amount of labor involved is astronomical. Like, it's just so much labor. And I mean, people, when they harvest, they recognize the culture. They recognize, there's a prayer said. Like, it's an experience. It was just really amazing. And then the rice is, weighed and unloaded at the plant. And it's one thing I found really interesting is that the raw grain rice, they almost like compost it. It's piled, and then they have thermostats on it, and it gets turned for about 4 or 5 days. So it's almost like a fermented process, which is similar to how they process tea. So I found it so interesting, the similarities. Then it gets put into these huge dryers, and it goes for I don't know how many hours till it gets to a certain moisture. Then it goes through another hopper, which separates the chaff from the rice. Like, it's such a huge process. But it was amazing. And the connections that we made with the harvesters and the processors, we're still, in relationships with them, business relationships. So it was really good. For me, my business, it's about building relationships, and it's not just a business. It's respecting people, respecting the environment, respecting the process, and being in these honest relationships.
And that's fantastic. So mixing tea with wild rice is an innovative idea. What inspired the unique blends, and how does it resonate with your customers?
Yeah, so how the wild rice tea, the manoomin tea, came about was when we had our tea company, we would get samples sent to us from all these tea companies from all over the world. And one day we received a sample from this amazing tea studio in southern India that is completely run by women, like right from the top to the tea makers. It's like a woman enterprise. So it was really interesting, and they make some really amazing teas. And then I opened one, and they were trying a new style of tea that they were creating called kukicha, which is a twig tea. It's a Japanese style twig tea. So I opened it, and I looked, and I said to my partner, Mark, I said, wow, this looks like wild rice. And that's kind of where the idea came from, because as a tea drinker, genmai cha, which is the Japanese style of tea, was always my morning tea, because it was like earthy and comforting, and I didn't drink coffee, but it was kind of like my coffee, I guess. So I said to Mark, we should try and do like our own style of genmai cha, but use wild rice instead of white rice. So Mark, having a really strong cooking background, he started doing some experiments with the wild rice, because you couldn't use it just as you get it in the package. It's like hard, it's like glass almost. So he tried different methods of roasting it and toasting it. And so we came up with something that worked and blended very well, because you can't use oil, you can't use anything like that when you're blending it with the tea. So it had to be a dry kind of roast. So we did that and, did some sampling, and it was like, wow, this is really amazing, because it's just such a gorgeous kind of, almost like a mushroomy, chestnutty, like it just brings all these characteristics into this green tea that we blended it with, a Japanese green tea. So it was really interesting. So we were doing it small scale. The problem being, it was really difficult to scale up the process, because no machine anywhere exists that can roast a small grain like wild rice. We tried coffee roasters, we met with different engineers, we got some really good resources in Thunder Bay, the Innovation Center at Confederation College. They had like an engineer that we spoke to, so we did a lot of research. He called all over the world to different roasting companies, and it just wasn't possible to roast such a small grain. So that was kind of like a difficulty for the last few years, is just trying to scale up and find a machine that could do what we needed to do on not a huge scale, because that's the thing. There are companies that can roast grain, but by the, transport truckload. We're not at that point. We're like kind of midway. We're not super small. We're not huge. So we still want it to be artisanal. We don't want it to be like a manufactured product. So that's been the challenge for us, but we think we've solved it. So yeah, we worked with a lot of different engineers and fabricators, and so yeah, it's going well. We're able to, scale up our quantities. So it's all good. But I can't really tell you what we do, because like it is a proprietary process.
Okay. So I understand your roasting method sets you apart from other tea companies. Could you talk more about the technique and how it changes the flavor?
It's been so amazing. Like when we first introduced it, we did like a soft introduction at the World Indigenous Business Forum in Vancouver. So it must be 5 years ago now. And, there's a lot of Asian people in the Lower Mainland, and at this particular conference, people from all over the world were there, and they were like, wow, this is amazing. So it's just been really well received. Then we did some tea festivals. We did the Toronto Tea Festival, where again, very well received. People are really interested because no one else in the world is doing it. And then we did the Vancouver Tea Festival, and we had a lot of people from Asia come up to us and say how it reminded them of home, the flavors. It was just so, touching to know that we're, bringing the world together just through this amazing beverage that we've created. And again, like I said, no one else in the world is doing it, this type of with wild rice. Even the wild rice people we speak to, they're like, wow, we never thought to do something like this. So it's just really, really innovative. And the interesting thing was, one of the biggest tea retailers in Canada, David's Tea, reached out to us about 2 years ago because they were so interested in what we were doing. They hadn't heard of it. So we actually collaborated with them on a blend that we called manoomin maple that's sold through David's Tea. We won a sustainability award at the Tea and Herbal Association of Canada's annual conference last year. So it's just where, people around the world in the tea world are really interested, and it's amazing. So everybody, it's just an amazing experience having all these people with different interests and different tastes and different cultures just be really interested in what we're doing and love what we're doing, and are just so thrilled with that we're taking this ancient grain and doing something really creative with it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess ethical sourcing and sustainability are part of the core values. So how is Tea Horse championing those things and what impact has it made?
Well, I mean, it's difficult. Thunder Bay, like we're quite isolated up here. But there are a lot of resources that I've accessed, like Paro, Women's Entrepreneur or Women's Center for Enterprise. They've been very helpful in finding grants for, again, when we were trying to scale up to help us we bought a coffee roaster from the U, and one of our fabricators tried to alter it to work for us. And so, there are so many resources. The Anishinaabe Development Fund, they provided some funding. So there are tons of small business, small or entrepreneurial women entrepreneur resources in the Thunder Bay area. Like I mentioned, the Innovation Center. So yeah, the isolation and then the cost of transportation, like as far as shipping, it's so much more expensive being in Northern Ontario. So that's been a huge challenge, but I think we overcome the challenges. And, COVID was as bad as it was. It opened up the world to us, as when you can have meetings online, you network with people, you can get information, you can research. So we really do take advantage of, technology, being in an isolated area. But for me, as an Indigenous woman entrepreneur, face-to-face relationships are really important to me. So now that we're able to travel, I do a lot of traveling. I've gone on several trade missions to the US with the Trade Commissioner Service of Canada, both with Paro, the Women's Entrepreneur Center, as a delegate with them, but also on my own. With Paro, I've gone to, I think, 3 trade missions for women business owners, one in Florida, Nashville. And then we also went on to Phoenix, Arizona on an Indigenous business trade mission last December. And so the resources that are out there for entrepreneurs, they're numerous. Like even the government of Canada, like I said, the Trade Commission Service have been amazing. I'm working with a trade commissioner right now out of New York State because we're looking at trying to get our product into the Seneca Casino and Resort. Right now we're selling at the Potawatomi Casino Resort in Wisconsin. And we're signed on with Wekopa in just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. So there's a lot of interest from, the nation-owned casinos that want to showcase Indigenous products, Indigenous businesses. So that's really kind of where we're headed. So it's really good that the Indigenous businesses and tribal nations, that we're all working together and supporting each other and, promoting Indigenous entrepreneurs. I mean, we're the first entrepreneurs of these lands. So, we're in business and we're ready to do business. So it's just a win-win situation for everybody.
And Denise, embarking on a business journey is rarely smooth sailing. What are some of the unexpected challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Social media is huge, but also, there's just giving samples, doing tastings. I just think that social media is wonderful, but you still have to have the reputation that, when people order, that you fulfill the order, they can count on you, you're dependable. So, you can do all the social media promotion that you want, but if you're not going to fulfill orders or fulfill your contracts or fulfill getting your product out there and keeping the stores filled, the local stores who are carrying your product. So yeah, that's what we do. And then again, it's just kind of word of mouth and being networking, being affiliated with Paro, being affiliated with, Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. So having these networks and affiliations is also huge, as well as social media promotion. And they tag you when you give them products, or somebody buys a product. Again, it's all about the whole relationship and networking.
That's great. For those aspiring to blend their culture with business, as you have done with T-Horse, what practical insights or guidance would you have to offer?
As I said, networking, and don't try and reinvent the wheel. Look for mentors, look for people that are in your industry, and people like myself, we're just so willing to give information. And that's what's really helped me with my business is I have mentors in Ottawa, in BC. Like I have mentors in different industries, especially people who have done it, as far as building a business and scaling a business, and just be open to these experiences, and be open to people who want to help you and want to work with you. And there are different associations and little networks like business women networks and different things like that, Indigenous networks. It's just be open, get mentors, and take advantage of the amazing free opportunities there are. Like there's podcasts, there's, like your podcast, there's online tutorials. It's like there's just so much out there. And then, like with the Para Women's Enterprising Center, you get uplifted when you're around other entrepreneurs and other business people. And it's just, putting yourself out there and being willing to take a chance and to be brave, I guess.
And moving forward, T-Horse continues to celebrate culture and flavors. Can you give us a sneak peek into exciting upcoming blends, projects, or collaborations you're working on?
We're working on another project with David's Tea that should be released probably in maybe 8 months. Our manoomin maple, the original blend with David's Tea, is being re-released in the fall because it was so popular. It's a lot of work. I've done a lot of traveling and connecting and networking and meeting. But yeah, so we're growing, and it's amazing. We're having our website revamped, so it'll be bigger and better. So yeah, it's a lot. It's really amazing, and it's just been a fantastic experience, and all the people we've met from all around the world, and yeah, it's great.
And I guess finally, for our listeners that want to explore T-Horse further, how can they learn more about the teas? How can they engage with your brand? How do they support what you're doing?
www.thorse.ca, and our new website that's not running yet, it will have a map where you can actually purchase our products in different stores across Canada. So right now, if you just send me an email or go on the website, you can order online. But as far as the wholesale, if you're looking, to stock our product, just send an email to info@thorse.ca, and I can send out some sell sheets. And yeah, so lots happening, it's tough because it's just Mark and I too. So, when you're an entrepreneur, you're everything. Like yesterday, I spent a whole day packing orders, and then today I was delivering and going to the mail. And so, yeah, it's a lot. We did have an employee, but she moved to another city. So it's, again, trying to find, people that you can depend on and, hire. It's tough. It's a tough situation right now in the world. Yeah. But good. I'm not complaining. Miigwech. And again, be brave and just do what you love and do it well. It's all you can do. And build relationships. It's huge. It's all part of Indigenous style of business, is build relationships. So yeah. Miigwech.
Well, thank you today, Denise, for joining us on the Packsack Project. This is our second episode to explore wild rice. And so for those listening who are interested in that, they can go back to a previous episode that we did with Charlene Mandamin, where she was talking about how she's incorporated wild rice into her programming at Shoal Lake First Nation. And to do that, you can go on YouTube, search for Packsack Project, or find us on Instagram at the Packsack Project. We'd like to thank you for listening today, and we hope that you have a great week.